in a glittering concert hall in New York, where the richest people in the city gathered to applaud the world's greatest musicians, a small girl in worn shoes quietly stepped onto the stage. People thought she was lost. Some laughed, but one arrogant millionaire leaned back in his velvet seat and smirked before calling out to her with a cruel joke that would change his life forever. "Play something," he said loudly, his voice dripping with mockery. "And if it's good enough, I might even adopt you." The room burst into laughter. What happened seconds later would silence the entire hall, break a billionaire's pride, and reveal a story no one in that room was ready to hear. And before we begin, if you love your mom and dad, take a second right now to hit that subscribe button and show some love to them, because family is the most powerful music any heart can ever hear. The Grand Aurora Hall in Manhattan glittered like a palace that evening. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls of light. Men in tailored suits and women in elegant gowns filled the velvet seats, sipping expensive wine and whispering about investments, art collections, and charity auctions. Tonight's event was supposed to be unforgettable, a private concert for the city's elite, followed by a charity auction where rare instruments and artwork would raise millions for cultural foundations. Among the audience sat Victor Langston, a name that carried enormous weight in the financial world. At 49 years old, Victor was a self-made billionaire whose companies controlled real estate, technology startups, and half the luxury properties across Manhattan. People admired his success. They respected his intelligence. But very few people actually liked him. Victor had a reputation for arrogance that matched his wealth. He believed money solved every problem and talent could always be bought. His confidence had hardened into something colder over the years, especially after his divorce 5 years earlier. He sat in the front row tonight, leaning back in his seat with a glass of wine in hand, barely paying attention to the classical performance happening on stage. The pianist performing was internationally famous, but Victor seemed bored. To him, music was background noise for people who didn't understand real power. The performance ended with a standing ovation. Applause thundered through the hall. Victor clapped slowly out of politeness, then checked his watch. That was when something unexpected happened. Near the side entrance of the stage, a small figure appeared, a little girl. She looked about 10 years old, wearing a faded blue dress that looked too thin for the cold night outside. Her brown hair was tied loosely with a ribbon that had clearly seen better days. The shoes on her feet were scuffed and worn. At first, people assumed she belonged to one of the performers, but she walked hesitantly toward the grand piano, sitting under the stage lights. Murmurs spread through the audience. "Who is that child? Is this part of the show?" A stage assistant rushed toward her, clearly confused. But before he reached her, the girl sat down on the piano bench. Her feet barely touched the floor. The hall grew quiet with curiosity. Victor raised an eyebrow, amused. "This should be entertaining," he muttered. The stage assistant whispered to her, trying to guide her off the stage. The girl shook her head gently. "I just want to play," she said softly. Her voice didn't reach the audience, but her determination was visible. The audience began whispering louder now. Some people laughed awkwardly. Victor leaned forward slightly, studying her. Then a thought crossed his mind, an opportunity for amusement. He stood up slowly, his voice carrying across the hall with practiced authority. "Well, this is unusual." The room fell silent immediately. Everyone knew Victor Langston. He looked at the girl with a playful but mocking smile. "Little one," he said loudly, "if you're going to interrupt a professional concert, you should at least give us something worth hearing." A few guests chuckled. Victor leaned back casually and added the words that would echo through the room. "Tell you what, play something impressive, and I might even adopt you." Laughter rippled through the audience. To them it sounded like a harmless joke. But the little girl didn't laugh. She looked out at the sea of expensive suits and glittering jewelry. Then her eyes settled on Victor. For a moment something strange passed through her expression. Not fear, not embarrassment, something deeper. Then she turned back to the piano and placed her small fingers on the keys. The first note echoed through the hall like a drop of water in a silent cave. Then the music began. It started softly, a gentle melody that floated through the room with delicate precision. The audience quieted. Victor's smile faded slightly. This wasn't random noise. This was skill. But then the music grew stronger. The melody blossomed into something breathtaking. Her fingers moved across the keys with astonishing speed and emotion, weaving notes together like a painter creating a masterpiece. The room went completely silent. People who had been whispering moments ago now sat frozen. This wasn't just good for a child. It was extraordinary. Victor leaned forward slowly, his eyes narrowing. He had attended hundreds of concerts in his life. He had funded orchestras and purchased rare instruments worth millions. But the music flowing from that piano felt different. It carried something raw, something deeply emotional. Each note seemed to tell a story. And then Victor felt something he hadn't felt in years. A memory, a melody from long ago. A song his mother used to play on an old piano when he was a boy growing up in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn. Victor's chest tightened. Impossible. He hadn't heard that melody in more than 30 years. Yet, somehow the little girl was playing it. Perfectly. Victor's fingers slowly tightened around his glass. How did she know that song? The final notes drifted into silence like falling snow. For a moment, no one moved. Then the entire hall erupted in applause. People stood up. Some were cheering. Others looked stunned. Victor didn't clap. He simply stared at the girl, because he needed to know one thing. How did she know that song? The girl slowly stood from the bench. She looked out at the audience again. Then her gaze returned to Victor. "You said if I played well, you might adopt me," she said quietly. Her voice carried through the microphone near the piano. The room laughed again, assuming it was part of the moment. Victor stood slowly. "Well," he said carefully, "that was certainly impressive. But I'm curious about something." He stepped closer to the stage. "That song you played, where did you learn it?" The girl hesitated. Then she answered, "My mom taught me." Victor felt a strange chill run down his spine. "What's your mother's name?" he asked. The girl looked at him with innocent honesty. "Emily." Victor's heart stopped, because there was only one Emily connected to that melody. Emily Carter, the woman he had loved before he became rich. The woman he had left behind when his ambition consumed him. The woman who had disappeared from his life nearly 11 years ago. Victor's voice came out almost as a whisper. "Emily Carter?" The girl nodded. "That's my mom." A ripple of confusion spread through the audience. But Victor wasn't listening to them anymore. His mind was racing. Emily had vanished from his life after a painful argument years ago. He had assumed she moved away, started a new life. But there was something else. Something impossible. He looked at the girl again. "How old are you?" 10, she answered. Victor's heart pounded harder. 10 years. Emily had disappeared 11 years ago. His thoughts collided violently. Could it be possible? No, it couldn't. But the music, the melody, the timing. Victor felt the room spinning slightly. "Where's your mother now?" he asked. The girl looked down. "She's sick." The words were simple, but they struck Victor like a hammer. "She's in the hospital." The audience had gone completely silent again. Victor stepped closer to the stage. "What's your name?" The girl lifted her head. "Lily." Victor felt the ground shift beneath him, because Lily had been the name Emily once told him she wanted to give their daughter someday. Years ago, before everything fell apart. Victor's voice shook slightly. "Why did you come here tonight?" Lily answered with heartbreaking honesty. "Mom said you were a very important man who helps people. She said if I ever found you, maybe you could help her." The room felt colder suddenly. Victor Langston, the billionaire who believed money could solve everything, realized in that moment that his past had just walked onto a stage and played a melody he could never forget, and the cruel joke he had made only seconds earlier now echoed in his mind like a punishment. "Play and I'll adopt you." Victor looked at Lily with a mixture of shock, guilt, and something he had buried for years. Hope. The night that had started as entertainment for the city's elite was about to become something no one in that room could have predicted. A story of regret, a story of redemption, and a story that would force a billionaire to confront the one thing money could never erase, the choices of his past. And as Victor stared at the little girl who might be his daughter, he realized something terrifying. The real music hadn't even begun yet. Before we continue the story in the next chapter of this journey, Tell me something in the comments. From which part of the country are you watching this video today?